It's now my pleasure to introduce Ashby Pond's resident, Raoul, who will share some musings he heard through the grapevine.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Tonight, I'm going to tell you a few stories about a couple who lives here. We'll call them Joe and Jane. They've been married a long time, live over in Bluebird. And as you probably know, there can be surprises in any kind of relationship, and some of those you'll see tonight. I call these vignettes heard on the grapevine. The husband in this relationship was Joe, and Joe was a very rich art collector. His apartment was filled with art, beautiful art of all different kinds. Very impressed with that. And one day, his attorney called him and said, "Joe, I've got some good news and some bad news. Which would you like to hear first?" And Joe said, "Well, I've had a bad day today, so give me the good news." And his attorney said, "Well, I met with your wife today, and she's invested $5,000 in a couple of photographs. And she thinks they could be worth upwards of $10 million. I've seen the photographs, and I think she could be right." Well, Joe says, "That's fantastic. My wife really knows good art when she sees it. So that is good news. So what's the bad news?" "Well, the bad news is that the photographs are of you and your secretary." So Joe and Jane, a little bit later than that, were sitting around their dining room table, kitchen table actually, having a drink before they went down to Blue Sky for dinner. And Jane has a glass of wine in her hand, and he's got a beer. And they're talking about this and that. And out of nowhere, Jane says, "I love you so much. I don't know how I could go on without you." And Joe is a bit of a rake, a wise guy, says, "Is that you talking or the wine?" And she says, "It's me talking to the wine." Then after dinner, they come back from dinner. They're sitting around in the dining room, in the living room, watching television. And Joe has the remote control in his hand. Most men need to have it in control. So he's sitting there and he's flipping back and forth between two channels, the fishing channel and a porn channel. Back and forth, back and forth. And after a few moments of this, Jane says, "Enough already. Leave it on the porn channel. You already know how to fish." So Joe liked to play golf, and he was a hot July day. He went to the golf course down the road here, 1795, or whatever it's called, and he came back. And on his mind, he wanted to have a cold beer. That was the big thing for him. So comes back to the apartment, and he opens the door, and he shouts, "I'm home, Jane, I'm home." No answer. And so, puzzled by that, he expected her to be home, so he goes into the kitchen, get himself his cold beer, and there's a note on the refrigerator door in her handwriting. It says, "It's just not working. I'm leaving you. I'm going to go live with Mother." He's surprised by that, so he wants his beer, so he opens the door. Light comes on, grabs a beer. It's cold. He pops the top. He drinks it down and says, "It's working just fine." I don't know what the hell she's talking about. Now, the last thing is that our medical group here decided to hire someone to come in and give a short seminar on sexual relationships among the elderly. And so he had a particular theme in mind, and when he finished, his theme was that he thought that the best kind of relationship was that when this couple would have sex once a week. And so when he finished with his talk, he decided he was going to take a little poll. So he asked the audience, anybody here raise their hand if you have sex as a couple once a day? Well, nobody raised their hand on that one. So he said, all right, how about once a week, which was his theory. And a few people raised their hands, maybe a third of the audience. Well, that's good. I said, well, then how about once a month? Practically nobody raised their hands. I said, all right, once a year. Who here has sex only once a year? Silent, complete silence. And then in the back, Joe and Jane are sitting in the back. Joe jumps up and he says, me. The seminar leader said, what are you so happy about? Joe says, today's the day. So thank you very much. You've been the best audience I've had since last year.